Well, what is up, everybody? It is Thursday night. Thursday night means one thing. Summertime is here. Things are heating up in more ways than one. Tonight on Jackson Kayak Talk, we're going to be talking about summertime fishing, tips, tricks, where to catch them pesky old bass. Let's get to this thing. Welcome back, one and all. It's been a week. Happy to have you guys back. We've got, like I said, a great episode tonight. Summertime bass fishing. It's summertime bass fishing, just fishing in general, man. It's like the 4th of July. It's like baseball, like an ice cold glass of lemonade on a hot day. Yeah, it just goes together. Just goes together. So we've got an esteemed group of Jackson kayak anglers. As always, uh, to give you guys the skinny on these tech tips, tricks, and techniques, and there was too many T's in there. I botched the whole thing up. So let's meet these guys. So we're going to start off. Number one, what's up, Matt Campbell?
Good evening, Chad. How you doing, buddy?
Good man. How are you? Tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, and what kind of Jackson kayak you're fishing in out here in 2024.
Uh, so you got the orange here. Originally from Tennessee, so I'm a Tennessee boy. Um, Currently living in Maryland now, and fishing out of the Coosa X primarily, which I absolutely love that platform. It's so amazing on so many different bodies of water, and it gets me anywhere I want to go. Chad, I think I lost you. Go big orange,
No,
Jason.
no, I lost you because I've muted myself. I'm really good about that. Like, I forget where I'm at sometimes, I think. But no, the Coosa X is a great boat, and it's a good time on the water, no matter what kind of water you put it on. I think, and it's a sleeper lake boat. It'll ride over some big nasty stuff with that big old bow on the front of it. It does pretty good, especially get that torpedo or Newport flying on the back of that thing.
Oh yeah.
Coming up, additionally on the panel, Mr. Joey Monteleone. How are you, sir?
Absolutely wonderful. And I still am in Tennessee, Matt. I live on a 3,600 acre lake that's full of big fish.
Love it.
There you
And
go.
I'm riding the 7-year old big rig, and you talk about what'll get you there and back. I'm telling you, that boat is perfect for this lake.
And speaking of the 4th of July, the old Patriot color big rig at that, the Joey Special, as it's called. I almost threw my red, white, and blue shirt just for you tonight, man.
Well,
I just ran out of time.
I've got them. I've got the red, white, and blue shirts, and I'm sporting the flag on the back on the Visi pole. And yeah, no, it's. I mean, it's good, and I get recognized pretty easily by the boat anymore, especially by the locals.
I can imagine so. And coming to us from the great state of out west, well, I'll let you tell where you're from, Scott. Scott Brands. What are we going to label you as? Joey's like the patriotic guy. Matt's the vol guy. We're going to call you like man. You're like, I don't know. You're like an inventor. You're like a creator, a great mind. Got a lot of stuff going on upstairs these days, and coming up with
Oh,
some pretty
thanks.
cool things.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. You're probably referring to the 3D printed accessories that I kind of put
Yeah.
put out there, but yeah, I'm from Johnstown. It's a little place about 30 minutes north of Denver. Yeah, I'm in the NAR, and as you know, it's got that tri-trek on there, so I've been 3D printing some accessories of my own that fit on that tri-track really well. So yeah, that's what I'm fishing out of this year.
That is awesome. You got a good, well-rounded group. Big rigs, Kusa X's, and NARS. That's oh my. I guess that's all you can say. I don't know. Got weird there. So let's kind of jump into this thing. Summertime bass fishing is the topic tonight for you kids at home. And these guys right here, it's a great group of dudes to answer some questions. So let's kick this thing off. Um, how does bass behavior change as we move from winter to spring, the spawn, post spawn, and now we're hitting June. It's summertime. How does bass fishing change as the weather gets warmer?
Well, you got two guys from what I would call above the Mason-Dixon line, so their summer is probably a little bit different. Here our water temperatures already hit 80 degrees. It's been my experience that the bass will kind of slow down because the dissolved oxygen in the water is decreased, so they don't move quite as far. Their digestion slows down just a little bit, and these guys are probably still experiencing some pretty good bites. With us, it's kind of a little bit more of a slowdown until you find them. And when you find them, then it's kind of making the adjustment. So I'll roll it back to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, 80-degree temperature. I don't know that our waters ever get to 80 degrees here in Colorado. Maybe towards the end of the summer, yeah, you might see some bodies of water hit 80, but it's pretty rare that you're ever going to see 80-degree water here in Colorado. High elevations, it doesn't get that hot out here. But so the fish are still putting on the feed bag. They do slow down. Out here, it seems like timing is the biggest thing. If you can get out there early in the morning, late in the evening, even overnight, that's usually when you're going to find your bigger bass biting. And also to go along with that, we have mountains here, so you can go up to some higher elevation lakes, experience some colder water temperatures, and fish for smallmouth up there. And pretty much they will still move deeper, but you can pretty much catch them all day. So that's the biggest change over here.
I would agree. We get the 80-degree water here, not as soon as down south of Joey, but we do get 80-degree water. I mean, as far as Joey was saying with the lakes, they're slowing down. I do use a little bit of a cheat code in the summer times because we have some amazing smallmouth water here, not too far away. So once it gets warm enough, I do spend an awful lot of time on the rivers chasing smallmouth. Their patterns will change as far as where they are, but you can still catch them on power baits all summer long.
And it's a good way to cool off too when you got to get out and do a little drag section.
Yeah.
Very much. So what are some of the impacts that the heat has on bass and bass fishing as things get higher? I mean, we've seen, I don't know if you guys follow any of the Elite Series guys or not, but Scott Canterbury had posted this week down there where they're at in Alabama, 101-degree water temperature, which is incredible to have that kind of surface temperature. But where you guys are at 80s and below 80s, how does that warm up affect these fish? Like what happens to them?
Well, in our case, like Matt said, we have Woods Reservoir that I live on is 3,600 acres, and the headwaters of the Elk River. We went up into the Elk today and spent a little time up there, and we'll do things. I mean, what you start to see is those fish look for overhead cover. We don't have a lot of docks on this lake, so you're looking for any kind of for me, it's like trees. If there's any kind of lily pad, we have lily pads. If there's any kind of overhead cover, they'll seek that because it's a little bit cooler. Inflowing water is a little bit cooler. So you'll find them compact. The good part is when you find them like this, and Scott and Matt may agree or disagree, but usually when you find them now, they're going to be stacked up a little bit more as opposed to random, like in the spring when, there's 5 patterns emerging on any lake. Right now, it's probably a little bit different.
Yeah, it's just like for us, if you go outside and it's 100 degrees, where you're going to go? And you look for the places that are coolest. So just like Joey was talking about, you look for some shade. So you could go shallow, find some grass, some matted grass, lily pads, whatever, and they'll get underneath that stuff and cool off. their other option is basically to go deep. So you can find basically two types of fish: the ones that move deeper into the cooler water, or those that stay shallow and they seek out that shade. And then you're going to have to adjust your presentations accordingly depending on the stuff that you're fishing and where you're finding them. So yeah, but yeah, I do agree that you do tend to see them stacked up. Once it can be, you can have some pretty painful days out there on the water if you're not finding them and figuring out the proper presentation for them. But once you put the puzzle together, you can have some really good days out there in the summer.
Yeah, I would agree that we got a variety of water and a variety of vegetation and structure. You get the lower Potomac below DC. It's a lot of, you can still catch them shallow all year because there's a lot of lily pads, a lot of grass. Get in there, and once you kind of get an area or figure out exactly where they're relating to, it's easier to catch them in better numbers. Then on the river, it's a lot of fast water ledges and shade. Last weekend we had a tournament up on the Juniata River, and I caught almost all my fish, and probably 90% of them in fast water, and then the balance of them were in shade. But even with our heat index was up to 108, they were in a foot of water in shade, which is unbelievable. But
well, and I just finished, and Will Richardson posted my blog about river fishing and the underutilized resources of rivers. And rivers stay cooler in the summer and warmer in the winter, so it's an ideal place to go. And for kayakers, I mean, we've got a couple places where we go. We found a little slough, and you got to paddle through. Even if you've got pedals, you have to paddle through this probably for about 20 or 30 yards to get back in this slough, and it's loaded with fish. And again, it's right off of the river, so you still got some current. So there's a lot of advantages to river fishing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good segue to this. This is kind of a random question that you guys didn't get on your list. Thermocline is something that happens in the summer. Joey, you and I definitely see it, but I'm curious, out where Scott's at, how does that affect you? I know for me, a lot of times I looked at that dissolved oxygen that Joey was talking about. I'll get on the Army Corps website, pull up my favorite lake that I'm going to, if there is a report, kind of look down, see where that dissolved oxygen gets weaker as it goes through there. And, I'll kind of target my depth range based on that a lot of times. Is that something that you guys do, and how does it play into your guys' areas where you fish at?
Yeah, I can't speak for anybody else. It's a little bit different here in Colorado. You don't hear a whole lot about thermoclines out here. A lot of our reservoirs, they fluctuate so much. A lot of our reservoirs get drawn down for irrigation and stuff like that, and a lot of that actually prevents a thermocline from ever really forming. Now there are some bodies of water where it does, and then in those places you will hear people talk about it more. But I also like to go out there and try to keep an open mind, because if I see a thermocline, let's say in 20 feet of water, my tendency is to fish, in that general area. But there's just so many days, and I don't know if this is a Colorado thing, where I go out there and the fish are doing something that you don't think they should be doing. So I try to keep an open mind. I'll go out there typically early morning, and it's basically it's top water fishing. Okay, top water in the morning. Things might slow down during the day. You look for them deep, but if you can't find them deep, you keep an open mind. You go back shallow. You see if you can find them. We get a lot of our bodies of water here are very small, but we can have a lot of boat traffic. So when the boat traffic picks up, a lot of times you're going to see a bunch of mud lines form, and mud lines push a lot of those fish up shallow. So then you're fishing shallow, even though your water temperatures are very high. So here, you don't want to get stuck with a mindset of, okay, I got to find the thermocline, stuff like that. It's about keeping an open mind. Yes, you're going to go for your seasonal patterns and stuff like that, but if it's not working out, try something different. Go against the grain a little bit, and sometimes you can have some explosive days doing that.
Yeah, I kind of laughed when you were talking about fishing the top water early. One of my personal, it's not a rule, but one of my personal guidelines is I call it top water till 10, and then I'll go do something else. And when people start talking about thermocline and fishing pressure and all that, one of my favorite statements is, they're full-time fish, we're part-time fishermen. So when you think you've got them figured out, and that's the fun part, because I know you guys are great fishermen, when you find that puzzle piece, when you pick up a different rod, because for me, it's visual. When I see something different and I start seeing these offshore weed patches and I throw a spinnerbait over there and get bit, it's kind of like, yes, you figured out one little piece to the puzzle, but you can't get too excited because 15 minutes later, it's going to change.
Yeah, it's on that changing pattern. Perfect example is last weekend. It was hot. We were on the river, and a little bit to Shane's comment, covered head to toe, and I spent a lot of time wading in the river during the tournament day. But I caught fish on topwater, chatterbaits, and crankbaits. So the pattern, depending on where you were and exactly which part of the day, it switched through the day. So, but mixing it up and keeping an open mind, Scott was saying, you just got to keep working on it and don't ever get stuck, in one spot, because, like everybody else has said, as soon as you figure them out, they're going to switch or change, or, a cloud came over and they decided they want to do something completely different.
And I'll let Joey and Scott also answer Shane's question too. How do you guys stay cool in your kayak on these hot days? What do you use? Do you have a routine?
Well, Shane's in a really good place because it's a different kind of hot. Down here, we got muggy, we got heat. They start talking about heat indexes. For me, it's like anything below 32 is cold and anything above 90 is hot. And I take a thermos of lemonade, and I've got a little cooler behind a red, white, and blue cooler, by the way, a nice Orion red, white, and blue that I had to convince them to put up for me. But I carry a cooler with me, and then I keep lemonade, Gatorade, water. And one of the tricks for me is I hydrate before I go. So if you go out there and you're already dry, you're probably going to be in trouble. I will take the hat off occasionally, but you want to wear lighter color clothes, those kind of things. All of that is going to help. And, every one of us that kayaks in the heat, when you find that little shady spot, there may not be fish in it, but you'll find me in it for about 5 or 10 minutes while we don't eat lunch necessarily, but we might get a snack, but we go sit in the shade for a little while.
Yeah, I put the
Absolutely.
kayak away and I jump in our neighborhood pool. That's how I stay cool. But anyways, if I'm kayak fishing on those hot days, it's basically the same thing that Joey said. Just stay hydrating, bring a ton of water out there. But yeah, it's definitely something you got to work through. I wear the light colors as well, fishing shirts, the buffs, the hat. It might not be the warmest thing, or sorry, the coolest thing, but you also don't want to get skin cancer as well. So get out there early. I like to take advantage of the early mornings or go out late. It's where it's not so hot anyways. The fishing is typically better, so you might as well go out there when it's not so blazing hot. But yeah, that's just me.
Great answers, gentlemen. Great answers.
One of the things that I got the most comments on I do radio every morning, and one of the comments that I make throughout the year is there's no such thing as bad weather, just people who aren't prepared for it. So if you spend a lot of time in the outdoors, and I like to deer hunt, I'm going to try to stay warm. During the summer, I'm going to try to stay cool. So it's no fun if you're out there and you're miserable. But yeah, early and late is really a big deal for us down here. I don't night fish in the kayak, because I live on a lake. I'm not gonna. I just don't trust doing that.
Well, that actually leads perfect segue to the next question. What are some of the optimal times this time of year to be out fishing?
I think it's all three of us kind of chimed in a little bit. I mean, if you can get out early and late, I think those are going to be your better bites. You get options to get some top water, get into more bites on a regular basis before that sun kind of gets up or after it's kind of headed down. I would say, try and get as much as you can in the morning and at night, in the evening.
Yeah, I'd agree. Before I even had my kayak, I'd fish from shore a bit at some of our local ponds, and I always found that the better bass were always biting during the night hours. So I'd take out a giant top water, like a 9-inch wake bait or something like that, and just start hucking that around the ponds. And it was always, yeah, you're gonna get those bigger bites in the evening as the sun goes down, but also deep into the night, and 2 o'clock in the morning. It seems like that's when those bigger fish they like to feed out here in the summer during those times. So if you're comfortable doing that, then that's definitely a good time to get some bigger fish during this time of year.
I guess I'm playing Chad Brock for a second and asking you other three guys, what about moon phases? Because I live by the moon. I'm not saying I don't fish. I fish 100 days a year, so I'm going to fish regardless. But I really focus on going to my best spots, throwing the bait I feel the best about, and on the new and full moons. What about you guys?
Personally, I go whenever I have the time. I don't have the luxury to go by moon phase. I do think there's something to it, but I've also gone out there where it's like, moon phase. It seems like based on the moon, it should be a hot day, and it's not. And then some days you go and it's the exact opposite. Now, I do think the moon phase makes a difference, but it's just one condition based on a whole variety of other conditions as well. But yeah, if you can plan your schedule around it, it's probably not a bad idea. I just don't have the luxury to do it.
I try, I guess maybe in the spring, I would pay attention a little bit more to it in the fact that, spawning time, but I try not to let it impact me on how I'm approaching a body of water. I'm looking for the best type of water given the weather in that day and just rolling with it. Because I feel like if I focus on it too much, I'm going to get sidetracked and not let my instincts and guts kind of say, hey, go do this.
I would have to say
I'll
the
say
same
one
as
thing.
you.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say I do have a moon phase app that talks about, major or gives major and minor feeding periods based on moon phase and stuff like that. So I will say that if it's a tournament day or something like that, I'm going to make sure that I'm in a good spot once those major feeding periods are supposed to hit. I don't want to be moving, crossing the lake and have a 30-minute run during those windows where there's supposed to be a major feed go on. That's probably the one case where I really pay attention to that. But otherwise, if I'm just fun fishing, I might take a look at it, but I don't really base my fishing off of it too much.
I would kind of be like both of these guys. I think I'm kind of like Matt in the spring. I'm really watching it because I know that that's going to kick off certain things, different periods of the spawn and the movements and so on. And then the fall the same way. You know that the full moon in the fall is going to do some different things. So I'm kind of watching that as well. But throughout the summer, it seems like I'm always scatterbrained, and I just wake up and go, huh, that's a pretty moon. It's still dark outside, and get in my truck and go to wherever I got to go to that day. But, you know, th- and to tune into what Scott said, I'll look at, different apps and whatever to find those feed windows. I always want to make sure if I'm here and we don't have a lot of current in our lakes, you just kind of want to be in your best place. But, if there is a lot of current, say I'm at Kentucky Lake or whatever, and I might look at the, you know, flow chart maybe more than I look at the feed window, because I know that flow chart on the Tennessee River or Cumberland River is going to have a bigger impact on what those fish do than maybe necessarily what that app says those feed times are going to be. So I kind of taken a few things into consideration maybe before I take the moon into consideration, I guess. If that makes any sense. Moving on. Next question. So we talked about optimal times. Um, we talked about shade. We talked about deeper water. So, what are some of the things that these bass are going to hold on during this time of year? What structures should anglers look for in order to catch bass in the summer?
Well, one of the things that I look for, regardless of where I am, and again, I'm a river rat. If I get a choice to be on a river or be on the lake, and you have the both, you can have both if you really want to. But right now, for me, it's if I see a steep bank with a large tree at a 45-degree angle, I'm throwing something past that, and it can be a buzz bait. I really like the deflection bite of a square bill crankbait, but fishing a jig, a crankbait, a spinner bait, any of those across that. And what I have found over the course of my long fishing career is secondary cover becomes primary cover when the water gets dropped down, whether that's because they're going to winter pool, whether it's that water's dropping because we haven't gotten any rain. So the secondary cover then becomes the primary cover. So if I can find offshore weed beds or a sunken tree, and I'm doing all mine no electronics. So I'm kind of Stevie Wonder of bass fishing. I'm just kind of feeling along as I go and see what I can find. If I find a big stump, then I'll back off and fish that. And last year that paid off with a 9-pound largemouth.
That's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. I mean, for summertime, the lakes.
Anybody who wants to go?
Some of the stuff I'm fishing, I'm looking more around here. I'm looking more for grass if there's grass or lily pads. I'm trying to get around there and work those grass edges, for like the lower Potomac where it's tidal, working the lily pads and the grass edges and the channels, depending on where the tide swing is and those points where I know the fish are going to be active, looking for bait. And on the rivers, I'm looking a lot for ledges and shade spots and grass islands because those are all going to hold fish. It's just a matter of what the pattern is for that day. For the lakes, in some of that, when I'm fishing grass, I'm probably doing more of that slower, outside of probably throwing a frog on the pads. And then in the river, it's all moving baits, whether it's topwater or chatterbait. I mean, because they're going to smoke it.
Yeah, for me, to go with what these guys are saying, it's deep water with shallow water nearby. I mean, you hear that kind of all the time, but a lot of times you'll see those fish move up and down those transition areas. They might be up shallow in the morning, and then they move down deeper throughout the day. So utilizing electronics and checking those areas. But yeah, if you can find, like Matt was talking about, like a ledges or deep humps or some form of like a point that goes down into deeper water, stuff like that. That's going to be those areas that I typically like to look for, especially for smallmouth. If you can find something offshore, some humps that are in deep water, not super deep, but if they're on top of a hump that's where the top's at 20 feet and then it plunges down to 80 or something like that, then those can be just killer spots to find smallmouth in the summertime. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of answer this too and kind of go with what Matt said. I like to find like offshore grass. I think that's kind of always been one of my fun things because a lot of anglers go by and they throw what they see on the bank, but I always feel like if I can find that grass line, as grass will obviously top out, then it'll kind of drop down. You'll have a lower level of it and it'll drop where there is no more grass. I like to find that very end of it and fish those kind of areas because it's not a lot. It's visually something that a lot of folks can't see. While times are changing with forward-facing sonar and different things like that, there's still a lot of anglers that won't push out there and try to find those different grassy points that are maybe submerged and hidden in 9 to 12 feet of water, something like that. Sometimes deeper, depending on how clear it is. But those can be really great spots to catch fish that are still out there and still kind of dumb because they haven't really necessarily seen everything that's swimming by them all summer long. Which I had to say that because it takes us to our next question. So bank fish will always be caught up shallow, regardless. I think you can catch them up shallow in the winter. I mean, Joey, we both know you can't. So when we talk about these fish that are up shallow, these fish see more lures than any fish in the lake because everybody that puts in a boat at some point goes by with a spinner bait with a flipping a worm and the different things that all these fish see, and they just sit there and they look up at it, and they're there because you can see them on the graphs and whatever. How do you guys, what are some tips to help target these lockjaw bass that might have seen every lure that swims that's hanging out on that one tree or that one little rock pile that's close up to the shoreline?
I guarantee you both of these guys got something they do that's different than everybody else, and so do I. This was a double willow leaf spinnerbait. So what I did was I clipped the front blade off and I changed the skirt to what they call the perfect skirt. I think you can probably see that in there. And I got it. It's a shad. It's like a glimmer type skirt. So they do see a lot of spinner baits, but they don't see a lot of single willow leaf spinner baits. So I throw that. And then one of the tips that I give people is, when that's not, so when they're chasing shad, that's great. When they're on the bluegill bite, then you can throw that bluegill colored skirt. And for me, one of the things that I tell people is you don't have to change baits. You can just change skirts, so you don't have to retie. you can just grab that. I keep stuff in my pocket, soft plastics in my pocket, skirt changes in my pocket, all those kind of things. But throwing something that is different for sure is something that you can do. And altering your baits. I mean, I'm sponsored and I'm a lucky guy. I get a lot of baits for free. So I get a chance to kind of play with them a little bit. But altering those baits is really a big deal, especially in pressured water. I mean, we all live, you're talking about the Potomac and we're talking about public waters. When you're fishing those, especially in the summertime, after Memorial Day, they start getting hammered. So I think you really have to do something different.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Doing something different, trying to think of things that other people aren't doing. A lot of new baits come out every year, and sometimes it takes a while for people to catch on to those baits. Everybody's been pitching Senkos shallow for who knows how many years. Well, now that you come out with the Yamatanuki, and it's kind of like a fat Senko that's doing really well, pitching it up shallow where everybody was throwing Senkos. People are picking up on the Yamatanuki now as well, but if you can get ahead of the curve a little bit, then you can pick up a lot of fish with those. Am I not supposed to mention that bait? I'm sorry, Chad.
No. See Chad over there going, no.
Good. Sorry.
Scott. No.
I'm sorry. This isn't live, right? We can edit that whole section out.
This is live.
But doing something a little bit different. Everybody's throwing a hollow body frog. Maybe you throw on a popping frog, something like that. Just give them something a little bit different they're not used to seeing.
I would agree with doing something different. I mean, two things. One is the luxury of wearing kayaks. So I try and get places where all the boats aren't going. If I've got to paddle like into the lily pad field, or if I'm back up a creek, getting to some of those spots that those guys aren't getting to on a regular basis. So that helps. And it gives you an advantage because those fish haven't seen all those lures. The other thing is, I think casting, I like to go to a lot of those overhung trees, and especially in the summertime when they've got the leaves and everything and they've grown out pretty good, and you don't have that big a window between the tree and the water, sitting low in that kayak. And if you can skip a bait, you can get a bait in places that, there's a plenty of kayakers, let alone a lot of the boaters that are standing up above you. They can't get that bait in there. So, and that difference between hitting the edge of the tree and maybe 2 to 3 feet back underneath the cover, that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, it can be a game of inches this time of year. You, like Matt was saying, put those baits, where other people can't, less skilled anglers, that they can't make that cast. You're putting it in areas under docks that you have no business casting to, but that's where the fish are, and you might worry about getting them out, but you have to hook the fish first. So throw it in there, hook it, and then worry about getting it out after you hook one. And sometimes you're not going to land them, but you might as well take that gamble and go for it.
I think one of the biggest things that to kind of second those is also that slow down. Maybe let it sit there for a second longer than everybody else does. I think a lot of times, like one of the particular baits that Scott mentioned that we won't bring up again, if you let it sit there like it's supposed to, it can wreak havoc very quickly. It can catch a lot of fish, actually. There's a lot of baits like that. If you just let it sit there for a second, give that fish just a minute to look at it, where you're not ripping it right out of there, it can make a huge, huge difference in whether you catch that fish or not. So talking about that stuff, as far as structure and different things like that, but pre-planning is always a big thing of any fisherman. We all like to sit around, look at tackle, look at our phones, look at whatever information we can find. But the biggest thing and the greatest thing that we have now is the ability to map. How much time do you guys spend looking at Google Earth or maybe Navionics or sea maps to kind of plan routes and plan different areas where you're going to go try to fish to maybe catch something for somewhere that you've not been yet?
Well, I'm the zero electronics guy. So I'm the last guy on the list for doing all this stuff. I just I eyeball everything. I'm going to stay around 3 to 8 feet of water regardless of where I go. And when people will say, I'm going on vacation, I'm not sure where to fish, I said, pick something that looks just like where you normally fish, and go to that and throw the baits that you normally throw or you have the most confidence in. And as I like to tell people, I'm playing checkers while the rest of the world's playing chess.
Yeah, for me, I spend a decent amount of time doing that online research, depending on the body of water. Of course, if it's a new body of water, I'll spend more time doing that sort of thing. But yeah, doing the whole CMAP Genesis thing, downloading the map if it's not available on my electronics already, using the Google Earth thing, going through history, finding when the water was at its lowest points, and you can mark those rock piles and stuff like that, and import it to your fish finder, and then you can go out and fish that stuff. But also this time of year, Chad mentioned it earlier, but forward-facing sonar is kind of changing the game. This time of year, you're going to start see a lot of these fish start suspending and roaming and chasing bait fish around. So if you've got that, you could spend your whole day just basically covering the water and looking for those roaming fish, and then you jigging a minnow, basically putting it right in front of them and picking off fish one by one that way. So forward-facing sonar is changing the game as far as that goes. But yeah, I still do all that other stuff as well, the Google Earth and all that. Yeah.
If it's something I haven't been to before, or if it's something I haven't been to in a while, I'm definitely doing a lot of pre-work, whether it's looking at a mapping software, Google Earth, whatever it might be. The difference. So I'm split on the electronics. When I'm on the river, I don't bring my electronics, but I will look at like, hey, if I'm going to do a float, this 8-mile float, I kind of want to know where some targets are. So I'll have in mind where those are. But on the lakes and the reservoirs, I definitely will have my electronics with me, because it just helps me with some of those drop-offs and points that I'm not going to see otherwise, but I want to be able to cast to and get after some bait. But there's a lot of research, ahead of time for a new body of water.
Very solid, very solid. So as we move into tackle now, let's start talking about the nuts and bolts of this operation. What do you guys have? Give us a description of what is in your kayak as far as your rods and reels go right now. What's your everyday carry?
Yeah, for me, I'm always going to have a jig rod. Always going to have a jig rod. I'm going to have a rod that is suited for crankbaits, and they're not the same rod for sure. I mean, a lot of people, and I'm not criticizing anybody, but if you're limited in your bassin budget, as it were, somebody thinks they've got a rod that does it all. There is no rod that does it all. So I'm usually carrying at least 4, sometimes 5. So there's a spinning rod in there for finesse. There's a rod in there that I can throw buzzbait, spinnerbait, topwater. There's a rod in there that I can use for crankbaits. And then I know Matt was talking about frogging. That's so fun. I mean, that's like the best topwater bite ever. Even if you get 10 bites and you get 3 fish to the boat, you still feel like that's a win. So, I don't think there's a frog season. There's times when it's better. But my frogging rod is something I got to help design years ago with a company that's no longer around. But it's a pretty stiff rod, and it's got 40-pound braid on it. And I don't go, like my jigs and my frogs, I don't put any kind of fluorocarbon leader on anything like that. I look at it as one more element to fail. So I want to go straight, straight braid. And people say they think that the fish can see the braid. So I take a marker and mark 2 inches, leave 2 inches, mark 2 inches, leave 2 inches. So effectively what I'm doing is camouflaging the line. But there are certain rods, like you said, that go with me all the time. And that's pretty much it. And I do find that 7.5 foot is where I top out. People will talk about flipping rods and all that. Man, I'm in a kayak. I don't need something as long as a telephone pole. And I really don't want that. So mine are usually between 6 and 7.5 feet long, depending on, again, what it is that I'm fishing.
What you, Matt?
I think there's 3 rods I'm pretty much going to have with me at all times. The top water, I'm going to have a chatterbait set up where I can switch between chatterbait, spinnerbait, and then I'm going to have a spinning setup for a Texas rig. Those 3 pretty much all year long are always going to be with me. The 4th rod, if I'm in the river, like summer times, I'm going to be cranking. So I have a crankbait to throw. And then when I'm on a lake, when I'm on the river, I try and stick to just 4 rods. because I'm trying to keep it clean. I actually take the Kusa. I use the underseat storage bag. I throw some tackle boxes and plastics in there, and I don't even bring a black pack. So I've got my 4 rods, and then if I'm on the lakes, in the lakes, it'll be 5 or 6 depending on what time of year we're in, just because you might throw a topwater for the first 2 hours and then not throw it again. So I want to have some variety there, but anywhere from 4 to 6 rods typically.
Yeah, and I'm typically taking 6 rods as well. Which ones I take kind of depend on the body of water and the species. If I'm smallmouth fishing, of course, I'm going to have a drop shot rod, but I'm not going to have my frogging rod, and largemouth is going to be the opposite. But I also like to do or bring a light spinning rod, and I have kind of an emergency tackle box where if I can't catch any bass, I'm going to start targeting fish that are biting, and I'm going to start looking like for crappie or bluegill or something like that, and just throw on a tiny little crappie jig, tube jig, something like that. And we're out there to have fun, so I might as well go out there, catch something, and have some fun.
Yeah, that's a great answer, man. That is a phenomenal answer. Now, as we talk about the rods, excuse me, um, line diameter is a big thing, and some people get really weird about it, and some people are completely on the other spectrum where it's like, I don't like losing fish, so I'm going with the heaviest line I can find. Do you think that line diameter makes a difference? Do you think that it helps the fall rate of your different lures? How many different types of line diameter are you using, or poundage?
I think we all get to fish a lot. I get to fish more than most people, but we all get to fish a lot more. One of the things that I've kind of found was I'm believe this or not, for my crankbaits and my spinner baits and my chatter baits and all those kind of things, I still throw monofilament, and it's either 12 or 14. I like the little bit of stretch you get on that incorporated with that rod. And then I think that line diameter thing, Matt was talking about cranking. The difference between 8 and 20 is gigantic in terms of line diameter. And if you can still make longer casts, you can get that bait down. But if you can't, or you don't, or you want to maximize that, you go with that lighter line. It does help a little bit. And then rod tip up or rod tip down is going to get you a little bit more too. So for cranking, and I'm not the best crankbait fisherman. I like it, but I'm not great at it. It's one thing I'm working on to try to get better at it. But at 73, I don't even buy green bananas anymore. So
I think it makes a difference when it comes to the action of the bait. If I'm drop shotting, I'm not going to use 20-pound fluoro, right? It's just not going to look right. So, I mean, I got my setup with 6-pound. Now, you kind of get into some debates with people over are the fish that line shy? Like I've never had a day where I've gone out there throwing 8-pound fluorocarbon, not getting a bite, switched to 6-pound, and all of a sudden it turned on. I've never had a day like that. Usually I find that it's more presentation than anything when it comes to line diameter. That's just my opinion. I've talked to guys out here that are very good anglers that are insistent that there's a certain reservoir out here with big smallmouth, and they say they can only catch them with 6-pound or smaller fluorocarbon, and that just amazes me. But so that's just my opinion. But there are very good anglers who swear by you have to go with as light as you can possibly get away with in order to fool some of these fish.
I don't know. I guess I've got my line that I use for each style of bait, and it's just what I stick to because that's what I like to throw that bait with. So I'm not mixing and match. I mean, we're in a kayak. I don't have a box of line, thrown in the front hatch and can re-spool on a given second, or have 40 different rods in a rod locker that I can just swap out. So I mean, my spinning setups, I typically use 8-pound, but I'm curious thinking about it with Scott. It's interesting because the other part of this is a lot of us say like we might use 8-pound or 10-pound, but my 8-pound could be the size of a 12-pound of some other line, or my 12-pound could be the size of somebody else's 8-pound. So it's a little interesting that, folks, I think, find what they're comfortable with and roll with it. I mean, I use 8-pound on my spinning setups. I use 12 to 15 on my crankbait to chatterbait rods. And then like Joey, for my topwater setup, I've got straight braid. I got like 30-pound braid, and that hole, they can see it. I'll tell you what, I've caught some ridiculous smallmouth straight braid that, I mean, I caught, a year and a half ago, I caught 219s on one bait, and it was straight braid. So you're going to tell me they can see it and it's going to make a difference? No.
I think
Yeah.
I think your point's a really good one, in my opinion. And a little shameless self promotion here. I got a book coming out in September called Strictly Big Bass, and one of the things that I really believe is when your presentation is good, all the rest of it doesn't matter. Not one bit. If your presentation is right, they don't care about the line because they're not seeing the line; they're seeing that bait. And one of the big keys for me is retrieve speed and random action. And all the baits that we talk about possess those. And the random action is really more important than what I call the field baits. That's the jigs, the plastic worms, whether you're drop shot in Texas rigging, wacky rigging, whatever, and retrieve speed, because the retrieve speed is going to be what seals the deal as far as I'm concerned. Like colors, we all got colors that we really like, but I mean, realistically, if your presentation is good, unless you got some really weird color, I think they're there to eat. If you make it look like something real, they're going to eat it.
Yeah, when I was talking about something that makes your brain hurt and kind of was frustrating me was I was talking to a guide out here in Colorado once, and he was talking about how they were using, 10-pound mono trolling for walleye, not getting anything. He said he made a line color change. So he went from like regular mono that kind of has, the blue tint to it to a mono with a green tint to it and started putting fish in the boat. And I'm like, are you telling me I have to start paying attention to the color of my line now and stuff like that? And he's like, the little details, they make a big difference. And I'm like, I'm a kayak guy. I carry 6 rods. I don't have a big boat like you where he's got, 30 rods in there and he can do a quick swap like that. But man, talk about frustrating. And, I've heard so many things that it racks my brain that people are paying that close attention to line diameter and line color and just these very subtle differences. And I'm sure you guys probably have heard, you buy the same bait from the manufacturer, same color and everything, and one will catch fish and one won't, because one was built a little bit differently and it sounds a little bit different. And there's something about that lure that catches them. Man, that is frustrating as an angler to try to sort all that stuff out. But
It's interesting though, Scott. You're talking about line. This is, I stumbled on this years ago, just dumb luck, honestly, because I'm a huge headlamp guy, especially in the morning when we're getting ready at ramps, tournaments. It's early, and I like that blue light on my headlamp. If you shine that blue light across certain baits or certain lines and see what the color difference is, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, I've had stuff that looks, let's say, almost green pumpkin, and when you shine that blue light across it in low light, it glows. That would be my only thing. Like if your lake water is enough of a green that blue shines out that much, that could be the case. But I mean, that's the bait I figured it out on. I've stuck with this whole time because it shows up a little different when it gets a little bit deeper, and there's something about it with those fish that they eat it. So, but sometimes you just stumble across something that works real well.
Great stuff, gentlemen. Great stuff. So talking about all this, what are some of your guys' favorite techniques for bass fishing? Give me your number one.
Ooh.
Favorite? Top water. Like a whopper plopper. All day.
As far as excitement, the frog bite's pretty hard to beat. I mean, everybody likes the top water bite, but when they come through vegetation to hit that, I mean, it'll unnerve you. But I mean, I have to admit, I really do like pitching a jig in someplace and just watching that line swim off, because I don't know if it releases endorphins. I don't drink and I don't smoke and I don't do dope, but that's as close as it gets for me.
It's hard to be a good jig bite.
Yeah, no surprise. I'm also kind of on the top water, and I love jacking them with the frog. They blow up on it, and you set the hook as hard as you can and rip them out of that cover. That's a lot of fun.
I'm gonna get weird. I'm gonna throw you a Carolina rig.
Oh, I can't do it.
Yeah, that is weird.
Can't do it.
Yeah,
God bless you, Chad.
It's weird. Hey, It's just something when they hit it, they knock the living time out of it. I like it.
I'm too
So we've
impatient to
reached.
throw a Carolina rig. I don't even like stop signs, so it's hard for me to it's hard for me to throw a Carolina. Although I've got guys down here on the lake that say exactly what you just said, Chad. They said, man, when they hit that's because we got a mix of smallmouth and largemouth, and they said when that smallmouth hits that Carolina rig, they said they will rip the rod out of your hands.
That's one of my favorite techniques. Like once it starts, like that's what I want to throw. It's just I like to drag stuff around. That's been my thing. Um, so as we're reaching towards the end of the show, it's time for the heater round. It's time for some random questions from me to give to you, and I'm gonna play some weird music. It's gonna make it even weirder for you guys. Um, so random question time. I'm gonna go with 5 of them. The lake that eats your lunch almost every time you go. Body of water that eats your lunch.
Dale Hollow. It's where the world record smallmouth came from, and the water. You can read the date on the dime in 30 feet of water.
We have a lake called Horsetooth out here, and it's the rockiest place known to man. And I have lost so many wiggleworts and jigs that I'm afraid to swim in that lake because I would get a hook stuck in my foot.
Man, you have to come back to me. I can't. There's a lake in Pennsylvania. I'm trying to figure out the name of it, and a buddy of mine would know that it's a clear lake. It's got grass. It usually sits at 12 to 15 feet. I don't care what I do. It just kicks my tail every time.
Most expensive lure that you have ever lost. Wives, turn off the podcast.
Well, you can hate me if you want to. I haven't paid for a bait in 40 years.
I had a custom made wake bait that, yeah, I cast it out, just snapped on me. I think it was like $70.
I'd say a bull shad.
Fair enough. Fair enough. The one lake that you've only been to one time that you absolutely cannot wait to get back to. You see it in your dreams.
Cayuga.
I don't have a place like that.
The place that I'm going to say doesn't hold bass. It's called Spinney. It's a gold medal water or gold medal fishery out here in Colorado with giant pike and giant trout. And I went out there and got my tail kicked last week. But I saw so many big pike on my live scope that I can't wait to get back there and try to catch some more.
So mine was Cayuga up in New York.
Bucket list fish to catch.
For me, it's a tiger muskie. I've hooked 3. I lost 1 and 2 broke off.
Yeah, I've never caught a muskie. I've had them. We're in some good muskie water in Tennessee, but I've had the follows. I've had them on, and again, I've never gotten one to the boat. I mean, I can live without that as long as you can catch a 6 or 7 pound smallmouth. I don't care about anything else.
Giant redfish.
I like it. All good answers. Bonus question number 6. Favorite Jackson kayak accessory on your boat?
The casting brace. Every time I see somebody selling a big rig, I think I'm not sure I was the first person to get one, but I know I don't ever see a big rig that doesn't have the casting brace. And I like to stand so the paddle can be in there when I'm casting, the rod can be in there when I'm paddling, because I do like to stand up.
My favorite is the additional tri-track that you can buy for the NAR, so I can mount it up front and have dual fish finders up front.
So I would say close second is the tri-track, but I'd say first is my underseat storage because it allows me to go minimal and just get on the river and go.
You're muted, Chad.
I muted myself. I like all the accessories. I think they're all some of these new ones, like you guys are saying, the underseat back. I like the hatch bin too that comes in the that you can get for the NAR and the Cruza X. That one's kind of a great thing, especially like Matt's talking going minimal with the Cruza X, which is when I fish my local river we call the rapids. It's it's great. Like you just go minimal, throw what you can in the seat bag, throw a little bit of something in that hatch bin, throw your 4 rods in there and a half gallon of water, and away you go. It's just hard to beat it. But yeah, so as we wind up tonight, we're going to let you guys kind of go around the room. I want you to thank the people that you need to thank, and tell the folks at home where to follow you guys at on social media. And we will start with Matt.
So, first off, thanks, Chad, for having us on. I'd also like to thank Orion and Jackson Kayak. Appreciate being on the Jackson Kayak team and family. Going to thank Delaware Paddle Sports. There's my local shop here, amazing shop that you can get anything and everything you want there. Thank iRod. I use all iRod fishing rods, P-line, and just the local folks here. My local series and all the guys that make it so much fun to get out and go kayak fishing and have a good time with the fellas.
Oh, I'll go. Jackson Kayak, certainly. Been doing this for 11 years. Never been as excited as I still get excited. Still fishing 100 days a year by going out and doing it. And Strike King, Lou's, Caney Fork Outdoors, who are wonderful, wonderful people. Canine Line, Charlie Brewer Sliders, Mid-South Tackle. I could go on and on and on. And Line Cutters, Vance Zahorsky, who proves the American dream is still alive.
Yeah, I also want to thank you, Chad, for bringing us on, giving us this opportunity. Jackson Kayak, Shields, Eagle Claw, local construction company that supports me here, G2 Construction, and then True Patriot Outfitters. That's something that I think people should definitely look into. It's an organization here that takes a lot of military veterans out fishing, and it's just an opportunity to give back to those people that served our country. So True Patriot Outfitters, make sure you check them out.
And if I could just add one thing, Chad, for every one of us, for me, I'm a stickler about life jackets. I will not fish with somebody that's not wearing a life jacket. I won't put a like on social media for somebody that's not wearing a life jacket. It's really senseless. We've already had 8 people drown this year in Tennessee. Last year it was 24, and almost every one of them is avoidable. So if you see somebody I carry an extra life jacket that I'll either lend somebody, and if they want to steal it, they can steal it. But, I carry extra life jackets and urge people, please, please, please zip up your life jackets.
Absolutely.
Yep.
The spot. Yeah, that's great. And that's awesome that you're carrying around extra life jackets, handing them out. Somebody needs to in some of these areas for sure. But yeah, so guys, thanks for watching at home. We hope you guys enjoyed this informative episode. These guys absolutely crushed it. We will be back. We're off for the 4th of July week. So happy 4th of July, everybody. We will be back with a brand new Doc Talk coming at you on, I need to be faster, 7-Eleven. We're coming back to you at the 7-Eleven. So we will see you guys on the next one. Thank you for watching. Good night, everybody.
Have a good night.
See ya.